Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Becoming Relentless. I am your host, elenoa.mccabe. I'm an IFBB Bikini Pro, an online health and fitness coach. And today I'm going to talk about the importance of your environment. And this is something that I have been speaking a lot recently with my own athletes as well as people in my life. It just seems like a very common theme. And I think that partly has to do with the new year, people setting new goals, having new resolutions, and also wanting like a sense of a fresh new start. And it feels good to kind of clear out any old energies, old things that might be holding you back and create space for new. So I wanted to dive in and just talk about why it's important to have people around you who understand your goals, what you're pursuing, who can support you, but who are also willing to walk with you in the pursuit of your goals. So something that is said often that I heard most recently is show me your friends and I'll show you the future. And that saying is pretty prevalent, not only like in the fitness industry, but I think just in general. And something that I used to hear a lot when I started bodybuilding was that the 5 closest people to you in your life are going to reflect like who you're becoming and who you are, and that who you're around, who you spend your time with, that does influence you maybe more than you realize. So something that some of my athletes have been struggling with that we've had conversations around is their environment is not conducive to their goals. And the most common question that I get asked like in that realm is, what do I do if my family doesn't support my bodybuilding? Or how do I navigate feeling frustrated or upset when the people around me don't quite understand why I'm doing what I'm doing? And my first answer to that is always going to be around communication, because I think what can happen a lot of the time is that when we're really excited to pursue a goal, we don't always communicate that effectively to those around us. It might be something that we decide internally and we start setting all of these goals and future visions for, but we don't necessarily have a conversation with the people around us, and we kind of just expect them to read our minds or to kind of go along with what we're doing. So I think first and foremost, having that communication, having a conversation and being intentional about it is always going to be my go-to, because I think for the most part, your friends and family, they want to support you and they want to know like what you're doing, why you're doing it, how you're doing it. They want to know all of those details and all of those things so that they can support you. And so if we frame this in the context of just bodybuilding, like for this example, if you decided that this year you want to compete, that's something that you want to do, and you're super excited about it, you can't wait to get started, but then you feel tension or you feel like you're not being understood because you go to family dinners or you go to events and, you know, your cousins or your grandma, they keep asking you to eat or drink or do things that don't align with your bodybuilding goal. But you just tell them like surface level, you're like, well, no, I'm bodybuilding, or well, no, I'm competing this year, so I can't eat that. That's not really a good explanation or good communication. So what I would encourage you to do is figure out why you're bodybuilding or why you want to compete. And it doesn't have to be like this super deep reason. I know a lot of the time, like everyone's like, oh, ask yourself why 7 times and figure out the deep underlying meaning. And yes, in general, that's good advice. But if you want to compete because you're curious about it and you saw it on Instagram and you think that you could do it and you want to see if you can do it, that's as good a reason as any other. But you have to explain that to your friends and family in a way that they're going to resonate and understand with. Because if your family's not on social media, or if they don't see the bodybuilding community and culture and they only know the very surface level general things that like most people know, they're not going to understand why you're committing yourself to this strict routine and goal unless you tell them, unless you have that conversation. So instead of being like, oh, I can't eat that because I'm trying to compete this year. Even the way that you frame that matters. And I think that we overlook that a lot of the time. Like we don't place importance on the way that we're saying things to other people. But if your mom is saying, why can't you eat dinner with us? And you're like, I can't, I'm trying to compete. You saying I can't, and I'm trying to do this thing, it doesn't convey a lot of confidence or conviction in what you're doing. Whereas if you said, I want to eat my own foods because I am trying to win the show that I'm competing in 3 months, that's like a very different message. And in that case, like your mom can follow up, she can ask questions, but she won't, hopefully, I guess I don't know, but hopefully whoever you're communicating that to won't continue to press. Cause I think that's the second most common complaint or question that I get is that like, oh, well, I've told them that I can't eat those things and they keep asking or they keep pressing. And it's like, well, why do they feel comfortable continuing to press and ask? Is it because they ignore your boundaries and they don't respect you? Or is it because the way that you communicated it in the first place wasn't effective? And it could be a lot of different things, but for the most part, in general, those are the things that I see. Those are the patterns that I see. And I do know with family, with close friends, with people you love and care about, sometimes it can be hard to be direct and set those boundaries. But the way that you communicate around your goals it's important so that they understand that those goals are important to you and that you're not being forced into it, or that you don't feel reluctant, or that you're not being dragged along to like, oh, I have to diet and I have to do these things. Like, no, you are choosing to do those things. And here are the ways that your family and friends can support you. Framing it that way is just going to be so much more helpful. So again, like the importance of your environment, I also think a very valid question to ask yourself is, why does it matter that people don't approve of your bodybuilding? Because that's another thing that I hear very frequently is that like, oh, well, they don't understand or they don't approve of it. You know, like they think that it's an eating disorder, or they think that it's disordered or extreme or stupid, or they think that I'm putting in all this work for a stupid plastic trophy. And it's like, okay, well, first of all, we know as competitors that it's not just about those things. It's not the results that matter. It's the process and who you turn into and who you become in the journey. However, I think asking yourself why you care so much about what other people think or whether or not they approve of what you're doing is important to at least reflect on. You might not get an answer, or you might not feel like doing that deep work. But I think that understanding why you do care and why it does affect you can help you in moving past that and overcoming those feelings. So I know for me personally, I've been bodybuilding for almost 8 years now. My entire family knows and supports and loves and cheers me on, but it wasn't always like that. In the beginning, actually, when my first year of bodybuilding, I didn't tell them that I was doing it because I was afraid of the judgment and the things that they would say. And I was afraid that they wouldn't approve and that would affect me mentally. So I'm not saying to do this. I actually think that that's a really bad idea, not communicating with your loved ones about what you're doing. But for me, I was in college. I was out of state. I was very far away from them. I'm very independent. So it wasn't really a big issue. Like I did my first prep, I did my first show, and then I saw them for Thanksgiving, and my mom was like, why are you so tiny? What the heck happened? And then I told her like, oh, I actually competed. I'm bodybuilding now. And it took a really long time for them to accept that. And I think it is because of the way I went about it. So that's why I'm saying I do not recommend like keeping it a secret. I don't think that that's very wise. But for me, I kept it a secret because I knew that if they disapproved, that I probably wouldn't follow through with it. And it probably took me like 2 or 3 seasons of bodybuilding for them to finally understand that it wasn't just something, this wasn't just like a phase. It's not a phase, Mom. It was something that I genuinely love to do. And I think them seeing me step on stage and me including them in the journey, like in the later seasons, is what actually helped in them understanding and accepting. And so now, of course, like 8 years later, it's just such a different story. And for my pro debut, obviously, like when I went home, I actually chose to go home early so I could spend time with them, because I knew that that would be a very supportive and conducive environment, because they know how much I love it and I've included them in it. And that meant having conversations with them. Like there have been 4 or 5 Thanksgivings and Christmases where I have spent with them eating out of a Tupperware, weighing my food, not being included in the food, the drink, the celebration, really. Like, not that I was excluded, but I would wake up early and go to the gym for a couple hours. I'd have to like plan my day around my prep. And then in the moments that were left over that I had, like I would dedicate to being very present with them, but also explaining to them like, hey, my energy's a little bit low, but I'm here with you guys. Like, or we're playing these family games and I'm not as expressive as usual. It's just because I'm tired, but I'm still really happy to be here. So just having like intention around it is also very important. I think the other thing that I wanted to touch on, which has to do with environment, is like, why is it important to have somebody to train with or somebody who can walk through the journey with you? And I think if you would have asked me this when I first started my bodybuilding journey, I was kind of the mindset that like, oh, prep is something you do alone. Like it's an isolation time period. Like, you know, you do it all by yourself. No one's going to do the stairs for you type of thing. But as I've evolved as an athlete and I've matured in my mindset, I think that having somebody in your vicinity, in your environment, who not only is going to support you and like cheer you on in a like emotional way, but also somebody who's like willing to go through it with you is it's a cheat code, honestly, because there are going to be days, there are going to be times when you're pursuing this goal and you genuinely ask yourself, why am I doing this? The suffer, the discipline, just the sacrifices that you have to make with your time and energy and food and all of these social things. Sometimes it does kind of feel like, why am I doing this? Or is it worth it? And having somebody who's there with you, who's walking along with you, who understands your viewpoint and where you're coming from and your feelings and the experience that you're having, it just makes you feel not isolated and like you're not alone. And for me personally, and I know for a few of like my athletes, I know that there's times in prep where I have like purposefully pulled back and isolated, and those have been the hardest times. I don't think that it is smart, healthy, or wise to try and pull back and isolate yourself from other people, especially when you have a support system and you have friends and you have a coach and teammates and a family who loves you and wants to be there for you. And so before you go into a prep or before you start pursuing some sort of goal, I think that it is incredibly important to talk to the people around you and see if there's somebody who would be willing to go through that with you. And it doesn't have to be all the way. I do know like some of my athletes, for example, like Sophia and Zach, like when Sophia was going through her prep, I know that Zach would go to the gym with her every day, or he would go do his cardio with her. And like, he wasn't doing the Stairmaster every day for an hour with her, but he would like walk on the treadmill, or he would intentionally like leave and go make her meals for her. And I think that even just those little things where somebody is helping in ways that they can, that is actually like furthering you along towards your goal, it makes such a big difference, because you don't have to do this all alone. Like, bodybuilding is already a very individual sport, because you are the only person that can hold yourself accountable to go through. Like, you're the only person that can wake up on time. Like, you can't blame anybody else for not getting up. Your alarm goes off, you get up. That's it. And I think that having somebody around you who is willing to go the distance with you and hold you accountable on those days when you might feel like snoozing your alarm, it does make a huge difference. Also, if you guys are wondering what I'm holding, it's a fidget. It's a fidget toy spinner thing. And it's been incredibly useful. So who you spend your time with, it does matter. It makes a difference. And I think that we also kind of live in a culture where there's a lot of extremes. And I think it's because when you're on social media, like extremes get your attention. It's like if somebody's screaming at you or if somebody's like capturing your attention, it's most likely because of a very strong opinion or something very extreme. And what I hear a lot is that like, oh, if somebody doesn't support you, like cut them off. Or, you know, if somebody doesn't understand, like you don't have to explain yourself, just like leave them, like block them, unfollow them, cut them off, this, that, what, the other. And I'm sure that there are situations in which like unfollowing, blocking, muting, those exist for a reason. Like, don't get me wrong. But if there is somebody in your life who loves you and cares about you and wants to support you, but maybe they don't know how, or maybe they're not doing it in a very helpful way, I think instead of blocking them or instead of going through like these extremes, being willing and open to having a conversation about it is going to take you a lot further. Because I have had situations in the past where I was not able to communicate my boundaries. And it got to a point in prep where my patience was so thin and so low that it was like, it almost felt as though the right choice would be just like cut them off. But that's the thing about prep, is it like really reveals to you deep, like inner things that need to be worked on. I think I've said it before, prep is a mirror, because you're pushing yourself to a level of physical fitness that is extremely uncomfortable. And it's not just the physical. Like, it's not like you're just like really tired all the time. It's that you don't have any energy. Like the things that you love to do, like going to the gym, lifting heavy, eating, like as a bodybuilder, we all love to eat. All of these things are not enjoyable anymore. Like, it doesn't matter what you eat or how much you eat, you're always hungry. It doesn't matter like how much pre-workout you take, you're still tired at the gym. And the things that we love become really difficult to do. And I think with that, we can be drawn to the extremes. Like we can be drawn to like wanting to isolate, cut everybody off, end all of these friendships, cut all these ties. And those are like the most common extremes that I see. And so I would just caution you, like when you're getting into a contest prep or you're pursuing a goal that's going to take you to an extreme, like remember who you're spending your time with, who you care about, and who loves you, and make sure that you're having those conversations and communication with them so that you don't get to a point where you feel like you have to cut somebody off just because like prep is getting really hard. So I think as a whole, if I had to like summarize everything, the way that my environment has impacted my fitness journey, especially in the last like 3 years, I can't even describe to you like all of the different ways that not only like my physical environment, but the people that I'm around have heavily influenced and affected me. The whole reason I moved to Texas was for bodybuilding. And the goal that I had of like moving to Austin was like, I'm going to go win a pro show and become an Olympian. And I'm going to like build my roster to 100 athletes and be this huge successful coach. And I had all of these goals and aspirations within bodybuilding specifically when I moved to Austin. And then now that I've been here for a while and like the people around me have changed, the gyms that I go to have changed, where I lived has changed, all of these different environments that I've been in and then like left out of have all each been like a chapter in my journey. And what I've noticed is that the more I mature in the sport and the more that I'm able to have hard conversations with the people that I genuinely care about in my life and the people who bring me like good energy, and I know that they do want the best for me. Like they're not looking out for their best interests. Like they genuinely want the best for me. I've noticed that like my priorities within the sport and like within my career and within bodybuilding as a whole have also shifted. And it's gone from like that all or nothing, like winning is the only thing that matters mentality, to now realizing that like there's so much more to the sport and there's so much more to life as a whole than just trying to win a bodybuilding show. And of course, like I still have my goals within the sport and competing and whatnot. But instead of there being this like massive external pressure that then turns into me putting internal pressure on myself to be the best or be perfect or be something that I'm actually not, that has just completely shifted. And I think a huge part of that is my environment. It is the people that I'm around, the people that I prioritize spending my time with and talking to, and actually finding a supportive environment, like a truly supportive environment, not one where I'm being like, I'm only supported if I'm doing something for them, if that makes sense. So I would say like personally, I can see the shifts within the environment. And I think if you've been like a longtime podcast listener, you can probably see it as well from where we started 2 years ago when there was the 3 of us to now. And if you have been here that long, thank you. I love that. But I think that's where I'm going to wrap this episode up. And I just want to leave everybody with your environment. It truly does matter, but it's not just physical. Like it's not just where you live or where you train or the city that you're in. It's also like the people that you place yourself around and how much they can influence you and push you towards your goals, or how much they might be holding you back. And sometimes it's not them. Sometimes it's like you're one conversation away from them understanding how to better support you. So if you've been struggling lately with feeling unsupported or feeling like you're not really understood within your goals, like I would highly encourage you to spend some time self-reflecting and just being a little bit more open to communicating your goals and having those conversations with the people who care about you. So thank you so much for listening. I appreciate you all for always being here. If you have any questions or comments, as always, feel free to DM me. But until next time, stay relentless.